I will need your help. We'll send it out by email.
You wanted the part B about money now. Did you want to not do that today?
No, we'll look at that in a minute, but while we're at it, go ahead, we're talking about that, go ahead. Let me then proceed to this. Here's what we gave last year. I mean, y'all have had it in front of you, and I'm looking at who we are not gonna support this year off of this program, and I don't see anyone that we're not gonna wanna support, but the board may feel differently. And what we gave last year was, I think if we rounded up to the, Springdale Park was a $3,000 piece. Grady got a total of $1,300, and might have gotten more, except honestly, we had to work with them to get the apps in. They're in better shape this year. $2,500 went to Inman. That was our tech foundation piece. I think there was sentiment expressed at the meeting about the fact that if we're going to give to one, and there's logic to this, you wind up giving the same amount to all, because we value all of our children's schools exactly the same. So that's $9,000. I'm just saying for openers, if you go to the 3 times 3. We gave the Bike Coalition $500 last year. We have already verbally committed to increase that this year because they didn't bill us for the
It's part of the form of payment for the
right
bike rally stuff.
And they've also done they've been an integral piece of Streets Alive. So that's probably going to double or triple. PEDS, we gave $500, and PEDS has been a big part of our lives this year. We appreciate their advocacy, even if we don't fully agree with every tenet of it, but that's all right. We don't even agree with ourselves all the time. Trees Atlanta, we gave them $3,500, and they're a huge part of our program here, and I think they're expecting that amount, but I mean, we can give them less. We varied it a little bit. The Church of Our Savior got $500, and that was before we were meeting every single month for the planning committee there, and before we used them for the master plan committee meetings, and before we had other meetings there. Hillside has gotten a nominal $250. I'm perfectly willing to drop it, to be honest, given that no other neighborhood has indicated the tiniest interest in matching it, which was the reason I thought it was good that we did it. The Ponce Library's got $29.50, and their budget keeps getting cut, and not on here. I assume that whatever we're going to do more or less for Church of Our Savior will be doing at least this year for the Baha'i Church, because all we've asked for them, we didn't put this as a condition, but Father Bolton was always smart enough to run in and say quickly that he would use it for community-based purposes, and I'll have that assurance from Baha'i Church that they will reassure us all that it will be used for broad community-based purposes and not to buy new Bibles, though in fact we have not put such a condition on it ever, but they voluntarily provided that, which is helpful. So with that level, we're probably up to 20 right now.
That includes the extra.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying we were at 16. We didn't give the Aaron Gross. I don't think Pam ever took our money for the Aaron Gross Award that she could have directed to somebody, but I'm sure she would have given it to the damn park, so it wouldn't have mattered. But we're at 15 without that, and if you bump up our if we go to 750, I'm just throwing these out for Our Savior, and 750 for that, that's another 1,000. We're down, we saved 250 on Hillside, which I'm perfectly willing to save.
We're talking about doing Inman at 5 instead of 3, or?
No, I thought we'd do them all at 3.
Oh, okay.
To me, it makes the best sense. And I can tell you, you don't have to answer questions from some parent that are impossible logically.
No, I was just thinking, you said, didn't you say 5 for the field of the?
Right, I did say that earlier, so at least 3. I mean, so that's 3 means we're at 9 where we were at 58, so that's 32 more. So we're at about 5,000 extra, in my opinion, just to stand still. So maybe that's what it ought to be. If you want to throw in an extra, that we can reallocate it to 20. I do think it's helpful personally. I didn't think it was as loosey-goosey as Peggy thought it would, and I hope I'm not being too defensive. I can only tell you should have been in some earlier meetings if you thought that was loosey-goosey. Which is not much of a defense. No, I know that.
And not my words.
Oh, no.
Unusual? Yes.
Robin Williams died.
The one. I heard it on the way.
Did it say say what happened?
They think it's suicide.
No.
He probably saw the
Asphyxiation.
characterizations on himself on
Hmm?
Family Guy.
Asphyxiation.
So anyway, I suggest at least that we think about modifying the amount to 20, and that's just gonna get us to stand still. But it will allow, except that Grady could go up from 1,300 to 3,000, which is a nice increase for them.
I think it would be helpful, I'd like to see us make it a little larger than 20, so we have some opportunity if we get grant applications from people who have not applied before. At least we would have a little room to consider.
Do we necessarily have to say that now, or could we set it at 20 and then vote again if we see an
We don't need to
influx?
do anything, we can change it on the spot. We're the board.
Well, I'm not suggesting we completely abandon,
No, we're not going to, because we're all worried about other looming shadows on the horizon. Or at least some of us are, I think a lot of us are worried about other looming shadows on the horizon. So I think we just leave it at that. I'll redistribute this in case anybody can't find it, and I'll redistribute it with the numbers I just mentioned that evens up the school, bumps up Our Savior, and adds in Baha'i Church. Or any other changes anybody suggests that we should make now. And then we'll go from there. And I would like, and I'm gonna, Lola had suggested dates, why don't we do that via email? They're all the last week of August. That begins the 25th. And basically, the candidates are Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, so I'll let, if everybody can respond to that. And it'll probably might be at Lola's house, Lola's workplace. This year, if that's okay with everybody, instead of being at the restaurant. Is that all right? All right, thank you very much for that discussion. I think we have moved forward. And I'm going to return, we did take care of the grants piece. I'm going to ask if it's agreeable to y'all that Peggy, Jess, and Lola, I'll forward all the grant applications to y'all, and you three can vet them as a group and make comments, or if you see deficiencies, contact people. I'm just going to pass everything on to y'all. Is that okay?
Great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for taking it up a second time.
Jack?
I appreciate it.
Sir?
do you have grant requests beyond those that you mentioned earlier?
Grady has sent one in that I've not paid much attention to, except to thank them, because they immediately wrote in to say that
We want
the
to
grapevine
get
was
in
that we
time.
already denied it, and I said, well.
Oh,
I did, I sent back to Chris, who's a very nice person, a link to Marvin Gaye with, I heard it on the grapevine. So this is the only grapevine I like, is this one, not any other grapevines, not the grapevine anywhere else.
Was it the CCC or the PTA?
It was the PTA.
So we'll also get one from the CCC.
I think we will. And we do have openers for Spark, and there'll be others. Trees Atlanta is sending one in. We're going to talk to them today, so those
Yeah,
will all
Spark
be.
already said theirs.
Spark is good. Let's move on. Why don't you keep going and see on the sidewalk ordinance, please.
First, on Virginia-Highland sidewalks, we had, give or take, 160 in our bundle. They've done a little more than 130. They've got, the city has an inspector out there for quality control, going back, because there's some that need to have grass sowed in the verge level. So that's going really well, and I'm kind of going behind the inspector and post-inspecting. I believe, and Jack's been through a lot of this with me, that in order to get the city to a state where it can reasonably plan for its sidewalk expenditures and where it can fairly and equitably spend any infrastructure bond money that it might allocate towards sidewalks, the city, as a precursor to that, has to remove two ordinances that are the two ordinances that currently
Alex addressed
attribute
this last month, so we're more up to it than anything. So
sidewalks to the
talk about where
abutting
we're
property
coming up,
owner.
I think, is where what's coming up.
There's supposed to be a work session later this month about the idea of removing those ordinances. Work session was tentatively scheduled, that was canceled, so don't know what will happen, but hopefully.
It's with the city community
Yeah, it's
development, human resources committee, right? I think. Anyway, the one that Andre chairs, so, and Alex, as we heard, both here and in and Pew does not currently support it, though he doesn't oppose the notion. But I think there is support for it. This might be sometime we did. I agree with Becky that we should just get rid of the ordinances that serve no purpose and only alarm and confuse, and nothing will be changed that will hurt. We'll have to see how this works. We're optimistic that it's got a shot, even over Alex's opposition, which is, we rarely disagree with him, but this time I think we do.
Maybe it'll come around.
He might. I have a note here from the GDOT folks at the Safe Routes to School. This is the Spark Safe Route to School piece. They're trying to figure out how to put some additional lights and crossing mechanisms in up there on Briarcliff. They've been using a police car in lieu of that, sitting in there every morning, which is quite effective, but maybe a poor allocation of resources. So the guy just wrote today to Mary Stauffer and me, and my next door neighbor happens to be their Spark rep on this, saying that they're evaluating their resources. I had mentioned that, Mary had mentioned that the Spark PTO and maybe perhaps us would be resources if they needed, if we're down to some reasonable small amount of money to make this happen. We don't know what that term means, but we'll be back with that. I wouldn't call that a grant request. I would call that a one-time infrastructure piece, and I'm just saying that's a potential use of funds.
Are they talking about a hawk signal? Is that what it would be?
Yeah, they're
Do we
talking
know
about
the exact location of it? Or?
It's been walked off in a big meeting, probably in St. Louis, right there. There's been a huge discussion about which side, and I've just stayed out of it and let them go at it. They're looking for equipment, used equipment that they could install. There's all kinds of challenges. I thought we can approach Alex.
I was gonna say Alex.
Yeah, what's the
We don't
call?
know, we do not know.
You just
I
put
don't
one
know
in
if we're
on
in
the
the
road, right?
Right,
for
that was a
council.
brand new one. It's different.
Oh,
I
it-
don't, no, that was new equipment. I don't know. I'll try to get a real report. I don't have one, so I don't know if we're in the 120,000 was a number mentioned, but a lot of that's for the equipment, and they hope to have some of that. So we do not have that. So, but this would be a huge benefit there. So that's on this. The master plan, I think we all know, with the final update on it, it passed. So I congratulate everybody in this room for their work. The Monroe Drive traffic calming, we're getting ready to, they're gonna redo the piece now that school's back and try to redo that was Joel's plan. Do you wanna?
For the side streets?
Yeah, on the side streets, there was concern about cut-through traffic. Joel Mann was Aaron's traffic consultant, designed a quick survey to do, that citizens could do, that didn't cost much, to try to measure traffic impulse at various times of day, to figure out how many people were parking there. The reason for that was to see if you could lose a lane there without killing the street parking. That's a local citizen decision, in my opinion. I have no opinion on that. But in order to do that, they need to know how many people are parking when, and how many parking spaces are available when. And they did a quick survey in July with the knowledge that they need to be redone after school got going, because it'll be a different dynamic. And if you saw the article in today's AJC about the DOT's notes that expressway traffic is down, local street traffic is up now that school is back, not a surprise. So that will be repeated, and we'll be coming forward with notions about what to do. That could include nothing. It could include losing a lane. It could include losing some parking spaces with traffic calming, with some bulb outs. I think we need local citizen input to drive that decision, and we can support whatever folks on those streets wanted to do, would be my idea for how to do that. That's my notion. That's where that's at. Music Midtown, we had a meeting with Alex. We reported this in the planning committee. We're trying to get another meeting in the next week and a half. We're trying to get 4 different council members, the Midtown Alliance, to go along with the money that we appropriated last month. We do not know how successful this will be. It has been decided that measuring noise in a systematic, meaningful way is probably not doable without a huge effort that's beyond the scope of this, but we are trying to see if we can at least measure, depending on the amount of money that gets raised, the things we talked about last year, the traffic input, the result of the traffic planning, the need for lane closures, and parking impacts. And Joel, by the way, was in part of this project, and he came up with a plan that would revise city ordinances that Alex loved very much, and that I also thought was brilliant, that in addition to all the fees that went with the festivals, put a per lane per hour charge for closing streets, with different fees during the day and lower fees at night. And I thought it was the best way I'd ever seen to incentivize people to minimize their lane closings. I thought that was no need to argue, just write that check if you want. We'll close this thing. So they're looking at all of that. There was a great meeting. It's identified some legislative changes that would have to be made. That doesn't mean any of them will be made. But the object is still to do it. That's where we're on, and we'll have a better report by the time we're back for the grants meeting. IMS expansion in the Field of Dreams, I touched on it very briefly. The IMS expansion is now scheduled to go to the Urban Design Commission with no further notice to anyone, a surprise to us all, later this month. So we're trying to follow up. I don't think there have been any changes. I don't smell a rat. I just smell people blundering around on their own, not blundering around, moving on their own timetable without necessarily including everyone. The last version we had was that they were willing to include an improved softball field. There are challenges on the softball field. It cannot be full size. Lola and I went over and met with the new principal, Betsy Bachman, to say hello and greetings from VHCA. She was very receptive, and she thought that there was absolutely no need for a full-size softball field. As in all our experiences, the longest 3 hits ever put together wouldn't have reached any of the fences. So we will see. That was her opinion as well. And so I'm hoping we get a real softball field in there where the current one is, with a new, that would come at the end of the expansion, because that area will probably be used for staging construction. But that would be the goal, to get everybody committed to that and get us to committed to paying the difference between the minimal things that they would do, and we would be trying to come up with a spiffy looking softball field, and they would not have to travel anymore. They could play their games
They can
at
play
home.
their games there even if it's not the right size.
Yeah, I promise you, the ideal fence is 180 feet. There's not been a ball hit in my experience. The only balls that get to the outfield are usually throwing errors, and they don't go that far. So it's a rare single to the outfield. It's not, the kids aren't big enough.
So Inman has a softball team.
They have a softball team, and they play their home games at Curran High School south of Memorial Drive near I-20. And it's a joke. It's a pathetic joke.
And so would the reduced size of the field still require excavation of the hill and removal of trees?
So our friend, y'all will remember, Skippy, who we had the variance with from Maryland Avenue, he and I went over and drug tapes out, and it looks like we could get a 120-foot field, and that's within a lot of room. The backstop has to move away in order to get a little more than it is to get. I won't say there's not a challenge or two. The best way to do this with the least impact would leave the spectator seating further down the right field lines and out in the outfield, which the coaches think is a great idea. The parents have not been heard from on this yet, but because that's the way to keep the field in there, I think it's really doable, and I'm hoping that we can get it in there. And there's not a huge number of spectators. And
If we build a world-class facility there, why would we go
well, the beauty of this, as it's conceived, is that it would be a small granite retaining wall out in right field. We would not lose trees. We wouldn't have to lose trees. We just build around the trees, and you could sit out on the newly terraced walls in right field. You could put 2 sets of them there, and folks could hang out. It would be really pleasant. It's true that your children might not be able to hear close up your softball advice, but other than that, it really would
Kids might appreciate that too.
be great, and it would work with every other community event in case there are any that we ever choose to use on that field. It wouldn't affect any of those. But that truly is the last thing I was worried about. So in any case, we're trying on that.
There were trees on the field of play at Cracker Stadium back in the day, so I mean, if it was good enough for Cracker Stadium, it's good enough for possibly under any number of names. Spiller Field.
Spiller was right.
I think this is premature, but on that, when the time comes, I guess I would like to consider some sort of matching program with the Inman PTA or something. I don't think the entire burden should come to the Civic Association.
So the beauty of it is they were gonna redo the softball field, and they were gonna put up a new backstop. And the differences that we were talking about might be reasonably, I think, but we can have this discussion then, it's a fair point. But I thought they would be a little more granite wall and a little more black coated backstop instead of the galvanized, which rusts and looks crappy. And then in the right field, the terrace walls, which might be seen as more of a community amenity than as a field addition, but we can have that discussion then. I will be thrilled if we can just get the PTA to continue to support it, which right now they do. And that would be, I do expect some potential parent reaction to be further than from me to Paige, from their darling daughter when she's batting. And pretty much, and if you think, I urge you to go and attend a game. If you think I'm just making that up, you will be shocked.
We're still gonna have a statue of an eagle, or are they the eagles?
We could do some cool stuff, but we'll get to that. Whoever's on the board then will have a great time with that. I really look forward to that group dealing with
Get
it.
Stephanie to do the terrace.
Parks Committee, I'm moving rapidly. David.
Yep, so for those that have been by, John Howell work is continuing to progress. They've been hampered a little bit by the weather of late. The place is literally a pond. I was over there today. Few changes. I don't know, Jack, if you know this, but it looks like they're going to have to move the staircase a little bit due to that hole that was there. So that's something that's up in the air. So there are a few modifications that are ongoing with the original plan.
Just do it and don't tell us.
It's fine. So net is everything's progressing. The wall's basically, majority of the wall is set.
They're working Saturdays and Sundays? I know, I've seen them on Saturdays.
So the good news is they've been staying late, which puts them there when the kids get out of school. That's great. I mean, because they didn't work a couple of rainy days, so that's fine.
Yeah.
They're really, the granite setting.
They need to decide if they're going to put drainage with the volleyball team, if they're going to put drainage under there. That decision will be made in the next week. If that goes in, that'll delay the finish of the project probably 1 week, but without that, I think we're looking end of August, early September.
And that's driven largely whether they want to spend the money or not, the volleyball people.
And I had heard about the delay, but I would be happy to jump in there and tell them they better write the check instantly or be gone with them. They only had 3 years to get ready for this. They don't have the money now, tough luck. So lastly, back and this concerns the Field of Dreams. As you know, this board did decide 3 years ago to honor Warren Bruno after his death by redoing the Field of Dreams, trying to rename it Bruno Park or whatever. We haven't been able to touch that because of the inland expansion, so they just took it off the agenda. Now it's back on the agenda. There's a meeting this Wednesday. We're not spending money yet, and we won't without having discussions with this board about with Spencer Tonnell, who's the landscape architect that did the adjacent Georgia Power renovation, which is paid. Spencer is a well thought of and talented, long-standing architect. Georgia Power paid that bill, which is nice. So we're meeting with them to see about the potential of their accepting the job of doing some design work to redesign the Field of Dreams in a way that's compatible with what they did at next door. And while we're at it, the object is that there's some room at the south end of the Field of Dreams, an additional 6 or 7 yards that got left as a barrier that we would love to go, Georgia Power to donate to us to add on to the soccer field, which is just a hair too small to be reasonable, but it could be just the right size. With the notion that we could get a soccer field there, that the soccer teams could play their games on campus, which would be brilliant.
Lacrosse too, don't they do
They
lacrosse?
can do lacrosse, it can be, that's a spring sport, and it's big enough for that. And the field would be redone in some way, probably some drainage improved, and all the galvanized would come down, and we haven't gotten any further than that. It would be replaced with the black chain link that is so dear to our sensibilities, and it looks a lot nicer, it doesn't rust visibly. So how that would work is tricky. Whether they would give us the land is highly problematic.
Who owns it? Who's they?
Georgia Power still owns it.
Oh, you mean
But
the
at very
extension?
south
No,
end.
who owns
buffer.
the rest of it?
APS. But Spencer, since he did our job, they loved him so much they've now hired him to do 3 others, and he's about to do his 4th down at the old 4th Ward Power Station. So taking him along for this is a good move. They think the world of him. And Alex has agreed to support the request. And the last piece of the request would be that at the base of the hill, which would clearly still be on their property, where there are very deep parking spaces, that they would allow Inman teachers to park there. There's 7 spaces and they never use them, and never is not an exaggeration. We have pictures all year long. They mobilized at 4th Ward for the snow emergencies. So we're gonna ask for everything and see if they'll give us that. And then, I don't know how, I can't imagine how this construction project's gonna go, because if we ever even can get that far, we raised the money with the Bruno family to try to do this on APS land, with APS handling the permit, but I think they're significantly immune from a number of regulations, so that might help. And a few trees would be lost down at that end, but there are no monsters that would be lost, but there are a few that would be lost. Fortunately, I think they're, anyway. So that's just the topic of conversation. This conversation is free on Wednesday, and the object is to see if we can agree on a scope of what it would do. But because it would blend in with their stuff, which is, by the way, what we copied to John Howell, which already existed at Inman, I think it would be a cool way to go. And we'll come back with, I hope, a proposal. And I'm hoping they'll be nice to us, because
Do you mean just blend in with their building?
no, blend into the landscaping next door, the granite columns, the steel fences that are in front of the Georgia Power building, and that whole motif around the whole length of their property along Ponce Place. It's granite and steel fence and trees and pine trees. It's a really nice look. And if they let Spencer do what he wanted to do, he wanted to kill the parking in front of their building, except on the very ends, and get rid of make it a street front, and like.
Well, further south, it's got nice boulders there and trees.
Well,
That's a really
we can
nice
renew
little-
that discussion. We asked them when we had this to give us that land while they were at it, and said we would pay for moving their security fence behind the boulders. That's at the corner of Highland.
Make a nice little park with
We
it.
would thought it would be great spot for people to.
This was discussion that was had back when the
Back when they did it,
project
and
was
they
originally
declined to do it, but we want to at least keep that on the agenda, because it's unbuildable and it's beautiful, and it would be a great place to hang out, and it's what we ought to do. I mean, a picnic table and 2 in there would be spectacular, and it'll connect to the Beltline someday, down Highland.
It's not far away.
So that's the whole goal, is to try to grab that from them. And I think they can do all of that with no loss of functionality if they'll just do it. And if they'll do it for Spencer and Alex, if they'll do it for anybody in the school. So I think we're gonna go do the ask. And then we'll be coming back with some cost estimates of what this might take, and then we need to sit down with the family, and this board will have to decide in the fall if it wants to take this on over the next year. The Bruno family and the various Bruno communities would try to raise money for it. And I think we ought to do it. It would be great. I think the whole corner could look great in 3 years when the school is done. It can look really nice. And with John Howell Park down there, really the whole place could look quasi-spiffy.
I like it.
So, I have nothing else, and I appreciate it. Sorry for all. I will send the Nate's.
I do.
Oh, I do have this. I do want, everybody should let us know if you're planning to come back formally for the board, and if you're wondering, let us know. And I would like to ask Lola and Ginny and Lauren to head up a nomination committee. Is that agreed? Are you willing to do that for next year?
It's a look on
I'm
her
only one
face.
here.
I'm hearing no objection. Lola is willing and Ginny is willing.
I'm willing.
All right, is that agreeable, everybody?
Sounds great.
Okay, don't know. One part of that will be to announce that if anyone else, you can accept nominations from anyone, not just, but also we would offer, if anybody from the outside wants to run, we will offer, as we always do, to run if they'll get it in a certain date, and y'all can set that date with John. We'd be glad to put their biography in with the biography of anyone else who wants to run. So,
But we're not gonna do a public call for
we've never done a public call other than to say, if you want to run, we'll be running this here and you're welcome to send us a biography. But I think the general task of the nominating committee in the past has been to find out who's going to be back and to anticipate shortages or goals or needs and try to figure out what candidates, particularly from the committee systems, or what citizens at large have expressed interest, and see how to match that up. And historically, we've not had a problem with 1 billion people trying to.
No, I know, but when I asked the question, I meant public notice, if you want to run, let us know.
But
And
if
I
you
haven't
think,
done
if you
that
think
yet,
Winnie
so-
will run again, I would talk to her.
It has happened in the surprise before that you have a lot of people wanting to run.
Yeah, I
You have a
remember
coup
that.
coming up possibly.
That's true.
How did that work out? It is, if there's any new business.
I just have a question. Radar sign, whatever happened with that idea, concept, with feedback from residents?
I got actually pretty good feedback from the residents. I thought I reported on it one day, that the most interest is on Monroe Drive. There's also some interest on Lanier and Barnett, so those were the top 3. And I would still like us
I
to
saw
think
it's
about
still in the
doing it.
budget, isn't it?
It is in the budget, but, you know, we can push it out a year if we need to, depending on what else hits the budget, so.
But you're not advocating that we do anything in the short term?
It's on my list of things to do to get more serious pricing from the radar sign company.
Okay.
But I needed a spot, and I sort of got bogged down with the city.
Okay. As far as the location,
Yeah, I'm not sure everybody's doing location.
All right, is there no further business before the board? I will declare the meeting adjourned at 8:32.
So you're getting stiff.
Very stiff. Getting old, what are you talking about?
The thing is, they've got